Hello, amazing listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Boo Business Podcast, the unscripted show where we unveil, demystify some of the confusing parts of birth, breastfeeding, and infant care during the first year of life while having a little fun. I'm your host, Naomi Catron, registered nurse and board-certified lactation consultant. Our mission here is simple: to foster collaboration in maternal child health and empower both families and businesses alike. We're all about creating a community where everyone feels supported and informed. In each episode, we dive deep into engaging discussions that span the entire spectrum of birth through the first year. From newborn feeding, because let's face it, it's something we all have got questions about, to tackling issues like tongue ties, the mysteries of pacifiers, mental health, bodywork, and just so much more. So whether you're a new parent navigating the incredible journey of early parenthood or a seasoned professional in the birth business, this podcast is your go-to source for laughter, knowledge, and some great insights. So we're here to make learning about boob business not just informative, but enjoyable. So join us for conversations that not only spark your curiosity, but also bring a smile to your face. So remember, every episode is a chance to connect, learn, and share. So hit the subscribe button and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Hey there, Amy. Thank you so much for being on the show. It is such a privilege. How are you?
So good, Naomi. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I am terrific. Amy, for our listeners, is the CEO and founder of Mamaya Health. Would you mind sharing a little bit to our viewers? Tell us what Mamaya is all about.
Sure. Yeah, so Mamaya Health is a women's mental health practice, and we focus on providing care from period through menopause and specialize in women's mental health, just that. We make sure that care is affordable, accessible, and inclusive. And so that means a couple of different things. Affordability is we take commercial insurance, we have sliding scale and even deep sliding scale that we offer so that clients can have access to care. Accessible is that we have hybrid options. So we are virtual primarily, but we have in-person locations as well. And then inclusive, just that we support and serve everyone, regardless of beliefs, backgrounds, et cetera, and want to make sure that people, again, feel centered and seen in their care journey. So it's really important for us as well to ensure that the therapists that we hire and providers that we have in our team look like the communities in which we serve.
That's amazing. What a dream come true. I mean, that's why I was so drawn to you guys.
It's been a journey in the making for sure. And it's been both very exciting, very daunting at times, and so humbling to be able to steward this in the world. I'm very grateful.
Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you end up opening this kind of a company?
So my husband and I, when we started trying to family plan, I don't think I had an idea of the fact that I needed to even think about family planning when we started to family plan, right? Okay. So we just tried and not tried, like some humans do. And again, in that, I was prepared for, my mom had severe endometriosis. She had like 9 surgeries or 8 surgeries to have us. And I heard that story growing up a ton. So I was prepared for that, but I wasn't prepared for much else. And when I experienced my first loss, it was devastating. I think it was interesting too, because I wasn't sure if I even wanted to be a mom, frankly. Like It wasn't something that I was like really passionate about or like had in my identity at that point in age. And then lost my first baby and was like, oh, this is a hat that I absolutely want to wear. And now I'm so sad that I don't have the opportunity to. And the sadness just was so daunting, from, feeling isolated to seeing other friends get pregnant, quote unquote, easily, to having these conversations in public where I didn't feel like I could be a part of it because I wasn't there yet. It was just this really interesting dynamic of experiences that led me to just need my own support. And I'm a therapist. And so I tried to start looking for help and I couldn't find help. I couldn't find any therapist who specialized in women's mental health or understood that reproductive and fertility journey and season and how it really is different in so many ways because hormones can impact our mental health and contribute to how we present or exacerbate things that are presenting. And so I decided that I was going to become the therapist for everyone. So I'm like, fine, I'm just mad and I'm going to go get certified in this. And I did. And then quickly, again, humbly, was realized that I was one of 5 people trained in Tennessee at the time. 5 people cannot treat the state of Tennessee and all the women that live across our state. And so I worked then at that point to start a nonprofit so that we could train providers up across the state and make sure that there was capacity of providers, and opened my first kind of iteration of this in 2019. And it's just blown up from there. And I've been, again, very humbled and grateful to steward and lead this in the world, because it's interesting when you see something that you see as a need or you feel so alone in, but then to also see so many people be so responsive in a positive way to it, or to be able to meet a need that is really tangible and concrete. It's just, it's a gift. So
you started right before
right before
COVID, when everyone needed it even more. That must have been interesting.
Yeah. Our, business ownership through COVID, business ownership, even now, right? Like, I mean, even in the last 60 days has just been its own, very complicated and amazing and profound experience and learning. I mean, I talk about it when I was sharing with our therapist, like, it's so hard to get and go to work each day when you're just as terrified about the realities of what we're experiencing. And in Nashville, right before COVID, right before our city shut down, we also had experienced a tornado. And like, how do you as a therapist process your own trauma in real time that you're experiencing while also holding space for people's trauma? And so there's this really interesting, there's a concept in infant mental health where you talk about like taking a scoop of ice cream and then taking a scoop of another, right? Like, and you're holding both. And there's this constant concept that I think therapists hold when they're walking alongside their patients, but they're also experiencing the same, again, for lack of better terms, traumas alongside them. And it is challenging because you haven't had time to integrate, you haven't had time to process, you haven't had time to heal. You are oftentimes hearing folks who are reflecting very similar feelings and frustrations and stressors back to you, while also just, trying to hold it together yourself. So it was an interesting time to lead and to learn. I still have a lot of learning. Didn't always nail it, didn't always do it perfect, but I think that we provided a lot of really great, job opportunities for folks during COVID. And then on the flip side, we, over the years, have served over 15,000 patients. So, wow, I think that there's a lot of folks who have been able to find healing, or at least started their healing journey, or we've been able to be a small part of it. And that's, again, such a privilege.
I have so much to say right now that we can just make a whole new podcast episode, because you're talking about the ice cream scoop thing. And we as Lactation, what I should say is you're based in Tennessee, in Nashville. Maybe not everyone realizes that. And you were serving people going through their traumas while you yourself were going through your own traumas. And I think that's something that's often not discussed. And so a lot of us who are in this serving field, whether it be as a nurse, because that's what I did for a while, or if you're usually, a lot of us who are in lactation don't do this. We're not trying to get rich. Like, you don't get rich being a lactation consultant, but you really have a heart to help people through their infant feeding journey. And so we're very heartsy, empathetic people. And a lot of the times you can carry the burdens or feelings. Sometimes you want stuff more for your patients than they even want it, and that's I had to learn. My husband's like, babe, you want that more for that patient than she wants it for herself. But then there's those patients who want it and they're doing all the work, and you feel that heaviness and you feel that. And so I feel like we might even in the future do another podcast episode of how providers can take care of themselves.
We've done some of those trainings again in the hospital systems, especially through COVID with the nursing teams. And it's part of trauma-informed care, right? Is like, as a provider, how am I holding and honoring and witnessing my own experience and not invalidating it, not setting it to the side, but, it gets to take up space. But in this patient's therapy session or in this patient's care journey, whatever the provider is, like, they're still centered, right? And I can name that this is hard for me too.
Yeah.
We can be human in these spaces. When, these sweet nurses and OBGYNs that we work with, like, I talk oftentimes about, I can't imagine how to cultivate the depth of just courage, but also like just goodness, the regrouping or just like the resiliency that you have to find and muster some days when you walk in from a room where you've experienced a stillbirth alongside a sweet family, and that family is gutted and devastated and feeling all the things that they would normally be feeling in a situation like that. And then you have to shift hard and pivot hard and go into the next room where there's somebody who's got a very typical birth experience happening. And there's elation and joy and all those feelings that are also very valid and normal. And as the provider, here you've witnessed a trauma alongside one in 5 minutes where, you know, in 5 minutes later, you're witnessing another type of experience. And I have so much profound respect for our medical providers and our healthcare workers, yourselves included, because again, I mean, IBCLCs walk alongside women who have milk production like I did after some of my miscarriages, and especially my later ones. And, you know, trying to learn how to care for my body, again, thank you, hormones, even though I don't have a lived baby in my arms, it's daunting, right? And yet it is such a profound gift. Again, infant mental health concepts, there's ghosts in the nursery, which are like our traumas, but there's these angels. And I loved when I used to practice more with patients, part of what I loved in trauma processing was finding these like sweet angels and these sweet moments that like, what were the like little seeds of hope that are threaded throughout the trauma that in that moment we couldn't see or witness. But there was this provider who gave me water, or there was this nurse who taught me how to care for my milk and how to dry my milk up if I need that, right? Like there was somebody in this room with me and I didn't walk through it completely alone. And I think that our providers are such a core part of, again, our healthcare system, which innately is broken itself in so many ways. But
I love that you say the angels, because you oftentimes don't pause to think about that. And we spend a lot of time criticizing whatever, like the actual medical system. But there are angels placed in these dark or sad times. And you probably don't know this, but I used to be a labor and delivery nurse. And there's definitely been those cases where you run to one room and she's delivering a stillbirth. And then a few hours later, you're intaking
for something different.
And the lactation side of things, I'm all about like, hey, if you've had a loss, give me a call. I'm going to help you dry up your milk. Like, don't worry about insurance. We'll take care of it. I mean, to the capacity that I can do that for. But I did have a doctor call me the other day, and I was thinking the same thing. Wow, how do you go from one room to the other and then go home, be with your kids? She was calling me to see if I can help one of her patients with breastfeeding who maybe didn't have insurance access. She was struggling with alcohol abuse and some other substance abuse, and she couldn't breastfeed her first baby. She had housing instability and vehicle instability. And this doctor went out of her way to contact me to try to help connect us so that I can help her patient. The fact that she took the time out to do that, and then she's going to go see like 15 more patients and deliver how many babies that day, and then go home to her own kids. I'm like, that's heavy and that's sad. And you can't always save someone, especially if they don't want to save themselves. But she went the extra mile.
But we can do something to connect. And I think that that's like a huge part of what Mamaya does. And that's, you know, how we got connected with you, Naomi, is like so much my company was built on relationships with providers and relationships with humans, right? Like I want to know the people that our patients are coming from, and I want to be able to call them and tell them that we got them taken care of, or that we made the referral out, or whatever it is. But like, we thrive best in relationship. We are not meant to do any life in isolation. And so there's such a joy in building this like provider network, or building the networks around our business, so that again, like when there is a time of need, that I know who I can call, and I know that they're going to be responsive and trauma informed and practice and deliver care in similar ways or similar values, so that everyone wins and everyone thrives. And that patient, again, experiences healing along the way and doesn't have to experience further hardship or further trauma because they're left to try to navigate what is a very tedious and daunting system on their own.
Right. I was so impressed the fact that you've been able to make a company that will accept insurance, right? That's a huge thing. And it's kind of shortens your lifespan a little bit when you take insurance. I take insurance and it's really hard.
There might be some gray hairs. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Is really, they're really trying to help shorten our life. But amen. You're doing it. I am curious, when you went and got your training to be working specialized with this patient population, so perinatal and hormones and even menopause, how different was the training you received in that training, like curriculum, than what you had been trained beforehand? Because I'm just curious how many people are like, I already have a counselor. She's not specialized. She doesn't have those letters PMH after her name, but like, I'm fine. Is that cool? Like, what are you thinking? Because I feel like I was a labor and delivery nurse and I thought I knew a lot about lactation. So some person might say like, well, my sister's a labor nurse. I can just ask her about lactation advice. Now that I'm on the other side and I know a lot about lactation, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about lactation as a labor nurse. It was probably enough to be harmful.
It's, I think, so generalized therapists are a force to be reckoned with in themselves. And that's not something that I'm not trying to pit any type of therapist against each other in any kind of way, because we need all different types of therapists to win. I think that as women, for my own lived experience, I'll speak to that. I felt very deeply misunderstood. I felt dismissed. I felt unheard, not validated, not seen, isolated again. I mean, those are all words that I've used in my healthcare journey, but again, in therapy even, because the tools or the resources that I was being given weren't relevant or applicable at moments. And so here I am spending an hour of my time a week trying to further my own healing, and I'm not getting what I need out of it. And so again, like, we're our best advocates, we're our best resources. And so how am I then going and trying to find and get in front of the right person? At the time that I gave birth to my youngest, I was still on Medicaid in Tennessee. I mean, I was not making, social workers also do not make a lot of money. Don't get in it to get rich.
Yeah, that's real life,
It's hashtag real life. And it was a humbling experience, because I learned very quickly through that system just how limited there are in providers, your limitations around who you can see, what time of day, all of that stuff. And to get to the specialty care, I had to pay out of pocket if I could afford it, and I couldn't. And so it was inaccessible to me. And that also then was just another barrier to my own healing. And I just, again, like, when I see barriers, when I see things like this or experience them myself, I just want to blow the systems up, because I'm like, this shouldn't be so hard. There's got to be a better way to do this. And I've just been focused on that minutely and obsessively and acutely for the last 5 years of we're going to make outpatient women's mental health care better. How can we do that? And when we say why is women's mental health care and the training that you can go and get in addition to the master's degree that we've gotten, hormones impact our mental health, hard stop. They do. And if we don't understand hormones and we don't understand how that presents, then we might be labeling something as anxiety or as depression or as difficulty bonding even, right? I can have low oxytocin. Who knew? Guess what you need for bonding? Oxytocin, right? And so it might present as a mom who is, struggling to bond with her baby, and she's teary and crying, right? We might say, okay, that's, postpartum depression in a very common, typical sense of it. That's one piece of it. But then how are we understanding how that hormone also is contributing? And then what are the resources or the interventions that we're wrapping that family, that mama with, to make sure that she's centered in her care and she's informed about how her body is working and what's going to promote resiliency for her in the season. If I have cortisol dysregulation, right? If I have high estrogen and a lot of cortisol flooding through my body, I might be more irritable. I might be snapping at other people, right? Sometimes this sounds like menopause or perimenopause that can go on for years. And so,
don't say that.
Again, and I think that there's this beautiful movement of functional health and, integrated health and stuff that is also really helping us as women, because again, traditional healthcare systems haven't empowered us to be informed about our bodies. And so we have been seeking and seeking and seeking and seeking and asking questions and being curious. And God, there's so much information on TikTok and Instagram and all these other places where we're trying to find and be informed and empowered about what we're going through. We're looking for answers. And so I think that it's, again, a powerful component, as opposed to labeling this as, you have a panic disorder, which maybe inherently that's the quote unquote formal diagnosis that, our medical system understands. But maybe there's also underlying things that if we resource this woman with differently, she's going to experience symptom reduction, and then she's going to find resiliency and healing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really passionate about.
I love that. I mean, especially what you're talking about with the functional integrative health. If you, as a listener, want to learn more about that, episode 42 is really great. It's all about postpartum wellness and understanding hormones and your thyroid. And we have a really cool functional health provider on that episode talking about that, because I think that oftentimes we just don't want one diagnosis. We don't want a label. We're a whole complex. We have lots of systems, and it's important to look at the whole person.
Can contribute. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that. Well, we're totally off script, so let me get us back on script. Tell me, how does the mental load of lactation impact a new mom's emotional well-being beyond what we traditionally think of as postpartum depression or anxiety?
I mean, mental load of parenthood is very real. And for those who haven't heard that term mental load before, mental load for me is just, again, like all the things. If I took a piece of paper out and I wrote down all the things in the day that I'm responsible for thinking about, considering, making sure it gets done, has to be attended to, that is the mental load. And that mental load comes with its own stress. It can promote right? Again, this is where cortisol and stress hormones come in play, because again, we're constantly having to think and anticipate needs and make sure that we're ahead of them. So with that, the mental load of lactation and nursing, gosh, I mean, there's so much about it, right? So when we birth, even just getting milk production started, if that's a journey that a mom is desiring as part of her postpartum journey, just getting it started can be daunting, right? We're in a hospital and we're getting checked on every 2 hours, and the baby's getting checked on every 2 hours, and somebody's going to come in and, hopefully be gentle about teaching us how to nurse. But sometimes it's just kind of like a manhandling and here we go and wish you the best. And so again, even in those experiences, we can feel disempowered. We can feel exhausted. We might not be able to retain the information that we receive in the hospital because we're just so tired. It's not like we just gave birth or anything.
Right.
We didn't do anything. And so then we're going home and we're trying to figure this out at home. And this baby is hungry, and this baby is crying. This baby is yelling at us because they are hungry. And that's what babies are supposed to do. We feel this deep-seated responsibility to be its sole source of food and nutrients. And that can create so much mental pressure and emotional pressure. And again, in this society of like perfection, and perfection being a very rigid kind of way of doing something, it can also create some of these just unhelpful thinking patterns or unhelpful boundaries maybe that we hold around how our lactation or our nursing experiences can look. And so maybe we don't make the full supplementation for what this baby needs. And so maybe there's a combination of nursing and bottle, or nursing and some supplementation that's supportive, right? Like, I think that we get into rigid boxes, and that rigidity also perpetuates our mental load, right? Because it only can be this one way. Feeding schedules, good God, like the feeding schedules and the back-to-back. And I feel like, especially with the first, I think with the second, I was a little bit more, again, prepared, just mentally prepared, because I knew what to expect. But with the first, God, I mean, we ate on demand, and that kid liked some food. And then I felt like when she wasn't eating, she was sleeping for 2 seconds. We were changing diapers, and we were back at nursing again. And so it just like, it's all consuming, right? Managing expectations, and external expectations or even internal expectations, which could be like, how am I covered when I'm nursing? Or do I have the freedom to feel like I can learn this in the space that I am, right? Because it's not like you can learn and not be half naked. Like, you need to be able to learn. And part of learning means that I have to be okay and comfortable enough with my body myself, which has changed a ton, with other people around me who might be coming in and out to feed my kid. And again, the mental load or the thoughts around that can also become daunting. Yeah. Just the sleep deprivation and physical toll. Making milk is its own taxing journey for the body. We are feeding and providing life to something else, which is a freaking miracle inherently.
Absolutely.
And we have to eat, we have to drink, we have to continue to take care of our bodies so that we can make milk, right? And so let's add that to the mental load is when do I eat? When do I drink water? When do I take care of myself? And that's not even talking about everything else that then I'm still responsible, like the laundry and the dishes and my sleep and taking a shower. God forbid if I take a shower, right? Like all of that. And so the mental load and nursing, especially early on, and especially if it's our first, comes with a ton of what could be, again, irritability and mood swings. It could be guilt and shame over how we wanted it to be and what it is, intrusive thoughts. For moms who especially get more fixated or anxious around nursing, those intrusive thoughts around like, is the baby getting enough? They can be very overwhelming and very scary and feel like they are all consuming. I think one of the other things that just can be really daunting is, again, when our lactation experience doesn't go the way that we hoped for it to go. And I always talk about like this distance between like what I had hoped for and what reality is, and this like grief in the middle that we experience and feel. Because it's the loss of it, right? Like it's a loss of how I had hoped this to be. And I'm having to come to terms with reality, but I'm not okay with it. And so we can experience a ton of grief and loss around it, and shame and comparison and all that.
I love the way you explained mental load. And the first thing that came to my mind, I had my kids when I was younger, and I remember there being I did not know this, but they're going to put a big spotlight on your vagina when your baby's about to be born. That was so stressful for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was trying to have this baby under the sheets with all my clothes on, and now I'm naked and you're putting a big bright light on my private parts. And there's all these, my kids were early, so there you have like the NICU team and all these extra people.
So many people in the room.
You want to talk about mental load and stress, and I just don't know why I didn't think that was going to be a thing for me, but it was such a thing. I still remember it. Like, it was really big. And then you mentioned something else. Oh, the gap between what you expected your breastfeeding journey to be like and then what it ends up turning out like. My kids are older. They're 19 and 16. And sometimes I still have dreams about if I have another baby, if I'll be able, like how much milk will I make? Because I had a struggle. Like I never made a full milk supply. So I'm like, I had one dream where I had all the ladies on my staff being my lactation consultant, giving me tips on how to make more milk and what pump to use. That's dysfunctional. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all these like unresolved issues from this period of life.
Is it dysfunctional, or is it just like, again, your brain and your body still trying to integrate and heal, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, and it's real. It's very real. And it's, again, something that because we live in a lot of space of shame and taboo around some of these topics like miscarriage, like if I don't make enough milk or, quote unquote enough, whatever that is, like, we can have this isolation that then becomes its own paralyzing and, almost self-perpetuating cycle of lack of healing around it. Right. Yeah. And I don't know a day, Naomi, where I don't miss my kids if I'm thinking about them. They're not Earthside. They don't live here. They're sweet little angels. And so like, yeah, I get to still feel sad about that. And I think if there's something that I had longed for in my life, if I had longed for a nursing relationship with my child to look one way and I didn't get to experience that, then like, yes, you get to still be sad about that if that's something that you really longed for, right? That's a valid thing.
Okay, as promised, to my faithful followers and listeners, I am revealing the book cover right here. So this is the book cover for my first book called Milked: Finding Your Flow During the First Few Weeks of Breastfeeding. So keep your eyes open. Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, this book should be available in the beginning of the summer. So in that ending of May, beginning of June. definitely, this is a fantastic book for anyone who is expecting, who just recently had a baby, who has a girlfriend who's going to be having a baby soon. If you're a grandma and you want to learn how to support your daughter or your daughter-in-law, this book is for you. There'll be more little tips and what's going on the inside cover of the book and the content and the other podcasts that are coming out. But this is just a little teaser so you know what's coming. What are some of those less talked about signs about like that a lactating parent might be struggling with their mental health? Because sometimes we're like, maybe I'm just sleepy. Maybe this is normal baby blues. Like, when would you kind of help people know like this might be a sign?
So I think that there's a wide range of what normalcy looks like. And so I start there with like, what's your baseline, and knowing your baseline as you go in, which again, like just like a plug here, if there's ever a time to really just develop a relationship, even with a therapist, do it in pregnancy before you give birth so that you have an established relationship and you have an established baseline. We know what quote unquote normal looks like as we go into postpartum so that we can track the changes together and just have a second set of eyes on it. Baby blues last typically that first kind of 6 weeks, and it's a very normal experience. Again, it's a way that our bodies release hormones. It's a way that our body is trying to re-regulate, get back to homeostasis. It's a normal part of it. But again, if you've never experienced it before, it can be jarring when you see a cat funny video on YouTube and all of a sudden you're sobbing. It's like, what just happened? And it just took over me, right? In the range of normal. I think when we start to see patterns of, things, so like with postpartum depression, again, it's like avoidant behavior, not wanting to socialize, not wanting to connect with my baby or my family, people that I normally would have been, in communication and contact with, just not really feeling excited about talking to, laying in bed, sleeping more. It could be a loss of interest in self-care. So neglecting your hygiene, skipping meals, withdrawing from activities. All of those things are, again, in that realm of postpartum depression. I would say the crossover between that depression and anxiety is where rage exists. And postpartum rage is also something that I think we, again, stigmatize and don't talk enough about. But man, irritability and mood swings and hormones, and then also just like the amount of life transition that we are navigating and becoming a parent, and the loss of self or the loss of things that we used to do, or again, like this adaptation that we owe to ourselves to transition in, we get to be mad about that too, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a degree of mad that can become harmful to our relationships, that can become harmful to ourselves even. And so then at what point is it worthy of asking for support with? Other types of irritability, so just like snapping at loved ones, becoming more emotionally volatile, kind of flipping up and down more quickly, feeling significant guilt or shame, and really identifying with that guilt and shame. So, feeling like a failure, and not being able to get out of a thought cycle like that. Postpartum anxiety can also be where we get like really stuck on our thoughts and have really intrusive thoughts about safety stuff, or just concerning things that we get in the cycle of, and no matter what we do, we can't seem to get relief from the thought. And so all of those things would be, kind of red flags for me of like, just you're worthy of support, ask for help. And that, again, that barrier to asking for help is oftentimes that shame or guilt that I might experience because, again, we've stigmatized mental health care for only being for those that we, again, judge or criticize or label, and that's just, we all deserve support and healing, and therapy is just one more tool in the toolkit for that.
Right. I love that. Thank you for helping clarify that. I get a lot of questions about medication and breastfeeding. So there's often a hesitation around taking medication while breastfeeding. What should moms know about medication safety and mental health treatments during lactation?
So many medications are safe. And I think I start there because I think that we inherently, again, as a society, sometimes stigmatize or taboo using medications throughout pregnancy or in postpartum. And there are many medications that are safe to take and are warranted to take. That conversation is best with your doctor, right? So your med provider, that could be your OBGYN, that could be a psych NP who has a specialty in women's mental health again, or that reproductive season. the med providers are always going to look at things like risk versus benefits. And so they're always going to start talking about where are we at in the pregnancy journey? How are we assessing for development? Are there risks to that season of development? What would the benefits be? What are the risks of coming off of this medication to that mom and to that baby, right? And that risk versus benefits conversation drives so much of the decision making then around what is maintained through pregnancy and what, if there is anything to come off of, what is weaned off of. There's really reliable resources that I love to use, and I'll pull them up in sessions with patients like LactMed. It's a great app, and it's from the National Institute of Health, and it goes through, you can type in the generic name of many medications. I think even like St. John's wort is on there, like peppermint, like not just traditional medications, but like, holistic medications or herbs that we can grow in our garden. Just to see what, again, the safety and if there is research, and they have both like the summary of articles in there for the research, current research, but they'll have effect size on baby, effect size on mom, at what point, what are the risks, what would you look for symptoms? It's a great resource. I think another thing is just talking to, again, your providers about understanding how much of the medication actually transitions or transfers to the baby. And some of that conversation can be really powerful because most medications are internally processed in us first. And so there's very, very minimal amounts, trace amounts that are actually, again, I think it depends on whether we're nursing or whether we're pregnant, but there's trace amounts that are actually available to baby. And so at that point, and understanding that, how can that inform my decision here? And then there's also non-medication treatments, right? So therapy, support groups, lifestyle changes, mindfulness. There's a ton of other tools that we can leverage and resource a person with, an individual with, prior to ever starting a medication, just to make sure that we've maximized everything else before we make that decision. So those would be the resources and ways that I would approach that conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I remember when I had my kids, one thing I'd love to do, it made me feel really like reset, as my husband would come home from work. I would go to this diner around the corner and they had the best strawberry rhubarb pie, and I would have decaf coffee and some strawberry pie and the world would be better and I would be fine. If it wasn't that, then it was Netflix, because it was really novel, because I'm old, and it was like you had to get the video still on DVD, and that would be what I would do to decompress. We were talking about medication, and I did want to put this out there for any people who might be struggling with this. Is something called DMER, so dysphoric milk ejection reflex. That can be treated with a medication. And it's very effective. And it's one particular medication you want to get with a person who knows what that medication is and talk to you about pros and cons. But it's also safe for breastfeeding. So I think it's important for people to know, like, you don't need to suffer. And if people don't know what dysphoric milk ejection reflex is, it's when they have like this heavy feeling of doom and negative feelings when they're pumping or breastfeeding. And it changes it's not always the same in each person. Sometimes they only have it with pumping and only during the letdown phase. And sometimes it's pumping or breastfeeding. A lot of the times people say it gets better as their baby gets older. But still, if that's 4 or 5 months of you suffering and you're pumping 8 times a day or breastfeeding 8 times a day, and you feel this terrible, sad feeling, I'm not sure how else you would describe it. You would probably be better.
I mean, it's like a thunderstorm all of a sudden just comes in and takes over. It's wild as an experience too for women, because it's like just as quick in and quick out, like a wave. But it really does. It just washes over. It changes your entire frame of thinking, and emotions with that. And so like, it just feels dark and heavy, and you loathe the experience then, right? And again, it's like the experience that you had longed for is so different than what the experience in reality is playing to be. And again, this is where, how can you be empowered to make choices to create a different experience for yourself so that it's closer to what you had dreamed of, right?
So it's like if you always wanted to breastfeed, but then you have this like wave of negative feelings that happen when you're breastfeeding. That's not because anything in your life is bad. It's like a super chemical reaction in your brain.
Nothing's wrong with you, right? Like nothing's wrong with you. You didn't do anything bad. You're not a failure. You're not failing at breastfeeding. And you can still claim and reclaim some pieces of that in the journey and get closer to the like dream that you had. And that's, I've heard so many women start therapy later in postpartum and say they wish they had started it sooner because they feel like it just always guts me, because the term that I've heard most frequently used is that they felt like they were robbed of their experience or their postpartum. And like, I just wish that we understood that we don't have to wait to make decisions, or we don't have to wait to advocate for ourselves as women. And again, I think this comes back to so much of how society has trained us to be around, feeling not heard, feeling not seen, feeling dismissed when we actually speak our concern out loud, and all these other things that, like, when we do actually ask for help, it's because it's really, like the last, it's like we really need help now, right?
Yeah. So that actually brings me to another really good question, because you're saying in the postpartum period, when people come to you guys for help, they say they wish they would have maybe started earlier, because if not, they felt robbed from their experience. When does it make sense for a mom to move from like peer support, like girlfriends, family members, their community, to more traditional therapy?
It's so individual. And I think that there's so much that goes into that decision. But I think that if you find yourself talking to your friends or your family over and over again, and you're not finding resolution, or you're not finding, resolution is the best word I have in that, then it could be really beneficial to go and talk to somebody. In addition, at any point in time that you feel like you need to just be able to process through stuff, therapy is always a great tool. And that it doesn't have to be something that you go to only in times when things are in crisis. Like, I think, in fact, again, this is what I said earlier, like establishing a relationship with a therapist, like way before things become something that could be an issue, is such a preventative measure for us, because again, we can get ahead of some of it. Maybe we can get resourced with postpartum planning and like really set ourselves up for success differently. Especially for those of us like myself in the world who've lived with mental health diagnoses. I have a ton of anxiety and OCD, and it helped me so much to just know what are the things I need to be on the lookout for, or where could postpartum trip me up, and what could I do to like make sure that, for instance, for me, getting sleep was such a vital thing. Like, that is the core of my mental health. If I am not sleeping, my husband would tell you I'm a mess. and my brain just becomes, right, like that anxiety, it just gets harder to settle the thoughts, or I feel like it's like an internal battle. It's exhausting. And so him and I, tag team just prioritizing my sleep as part of the postpartum period. And that made a world of a difference. I love that.
Sleep is so important.
Oh, is it?
That's why I'm like, please don't wake up with your baby every 2.5 hours. I know people will tell you that, but you need to have a customized plan with a knowledgeable person to help you balance healing, mental health, and milk production. You don't need to forfeit one over the other.
Well, and so let's talk about that for a second, because I think you're talking about something that's, again, something that we as women take the burden of on in postpartum, especially, is like, right, especially for feeding this baby.
You made that baby too, partner. Wake up and help me feed this baby.
Absolutely. And so, again, like, if our partners are getting 6 to 8 hours of normal, consistent, steady sleep, we also can get a steady 6 to 8 hours of sleep and one bottle, throughout that time period for the baby. So the partner can also bond and be empowered to support and learn their role in that relationship too, and build that relationship is so vital and life-giving for both parties, right?
Yeah.
In addition, I would argue that, like, when sleep goes, if I can't fall asleep or I can't stay asleep when the baby's asleep, that's one of the most telltale signs that there's something underlying hormonally going on that's like turning into some type of postpartum mood disorder. So and we should be able to go to sleep. Like, we should be tired. Babies are exhausting. Healing in postpartum itself is exhausting, and healing doesn't happen if we don't get sleep. That's where our body restores, repairs, and rests, right? And there's another like really interesting thing that I think we can get into the habit of, which is like, again, like pushing on 2 hours of sleep at a time, which we need 4 consistent hours of sleep to just start and get through a REM cycle.
Yes.
And a REM cycle is the deep, deep, deep sleep cycle that's so important for our health. It's so important for our brains. Again, repair, restore, rest happens in REM. And if we can't get REM sleep, and we've done that for a couple nights in a row, even because we're pushing through and we're being strong and we're the badass women that we are. And again, we've pushed through a lot of our lives. That's great. It's not going to serve us in the season. For even like a veteran to a person who has dementia, if we don't sleep, if we sleep for less than 4 hours a day for consistent days in a row, 3 or more days is typically where it starts to get wonky. I mean, we start to experience auditory and visual hallucinations. And that's for a normal person. That's for, again, a veteran who is trained. That's for a human who has dementia. That's for me or you, Naomi. And so if we're only getting 2 hours of sleep at a time, and that's what we're just pushing through and pushing through and pushing through, like, mama, know that you're going to break, not because something's wrong with you, not because something is bad or you've done something wrong, but because your sweet body needs rest. And that's where we start, right? So that's where therapy, again, like therapy starts with like, okay, let's get a sleep intervention plan in place. How are we going to approach this? What resources or supports do we need to wrap around this woman with? Is it, again, like bringing a partner in and doing a sleep schedule and talking through that?
It is.
Is it, again, like this rigid thought of I need to nurse all the time or the baby's not going to want to nurse, and really working through my fear around if I used a bottle once, right? Yes. And what is that fear rooted in? And this is where, again, therapy can be such a great adjacent to lactation support.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I think it's also important to have a lactation consultant and, therapy providers that can work together, because I think if a mom has milk for like days, like tons of milk, sleeping 6 to 8 hours might cause her to have mastitis or some issues, right? And also depends how old the baby is. But 4 hours of sleep, if we do this properly, like we can make this happen. And that's one of the things I try my best to get our patients, our whole practice to adopt, is how can we make a plan to get each of you guys to have 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, tag out, let the other person get 4 hours. Let's do this at the minimum. And then it'd be great if you can get 2 4-hour stretches. And sometimes the pump and the bottle does come into play. One bottle is not going to make your baby all of a sudden refuse to breast. However, there are some people who don't believe me. And they're like, nope, I'm going to wake up and feed my baby every 2 hours, every 2 hours, every 2 hours. And I'm like, babe, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. And we'll do this if that's what you want to do for a couple of weeks. But I promise you, you'll be able to make more milk, and you'll be able to heal and feel and make rational decisions in the morning when you get at least 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
It's so hard to let go of, again, like the way that we envisioned or dreamed this experience to be. And then, what are the choices that are actually going to set all of us up in this family system for the most success? And those things might come in conflict at times. And so where are the safe spaces to process and work through that, get ideas about different ways? What have other people done? Naomi, back in the day, this, again, like God bless our society right now, because like back in the day, it would have been like you feeding my kid for the 4 to 6 hour stretch of sleep that I'd be getting, right? Like we'd be tag teaming this sucker.
Yes. Yeah.
And we would be in a community of women
Absolutely.
that would be able to tag team and step in, and our kids would all be being raised together. And being in this, we were, I have this, I don't know if it's a belief, but I'm curious about if one person was ever meant to be the sole source of food for one baby, right? Like
raising people, like as they get older, I don't know if it's a one person job either, never mind just the food, but like I did not grow up with a single parent. Like we had, my aunt and uncle, and then my mom and my dad. And we had one driveway and 2 houses. So there's 4 adults with 5 kids. That was a better ratio than just.
It's a better ratio.
I mean, I didn't have 5 siblings, but I mean like between the cousins.
Yep.
And that's kind of like the way
you're almost man to man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again,
you also need a break though, too.
You need a break. And I think that there's just, our society has changed so much. And so again, like where have our expectations for what our bodies can do, what our roles and responsibilities are in each of these seasons? And then where is it just really okay to be willing to receive support, to ask for help, to tag other people in, to be resourced differently? Because again, what worked in the 1900s Which I see these memes about
born in the 1900s.
Oh my God. Yes. I'm like, this is so hilarious. Yes, I was. Yeah, but like, you know, the true 1900s, the early 1900s, like how life was then, how the life was in the 1950s and 60s to how life is now. It is very different. And that warrants different types of support and resourcing for family systems to thrive in pregnancy and postpartum.
Yeah, totally agree. What's the one thing you wish every new mom knew about their mental health during lactation? I mean, I think the hormone part is a big one. Anything else?
The hormone part's a big one. And I think just, you know, like, you don't have to go at it alone, mama. Like, there are so many ways that, again, as women, we thrive on pushing through, and we thrive on, you know, getting it right. And gosh, I'm the epitome of, I can put my mind to anything and get it done. And I think one of the most kind of like bringing to my knees moments in motherhood has just been this over and over lesson of like, the more in moments where I've tried to go at it alone, the more I've struggled emotionally, mentally, physically. And we are so much stronger together. And that means that like, we can resource each other with support. It is okay to ask for help. And like taking that brave first step of saying like, man, I need to go talk to someone, or I need further resourcing, is something that you should be so proud of, because you're doing something that is so different than what generations in the past have done too, to resource themselves. And you're teaching the women around you as well that there's permission for us to need and to be resourced differently. And I think that that's such a powerful statement. So, you know, I think at the most bare minimum, it's like, mama, you're not alone. But I think, you know, at the maximum, it's like, there are so many resources that, and your voice is so powerful, and all that's needed to change an experience is your voice.
Right. I love that. I love your company, and I love your website. On the website, on the homepage, it does say you guys provide compassionate therapy for women and mothers, and 1 in 5 women in the U.S. experience mental health challenges. I think that's important to say that your company does provide support for people through the perimenopause and menopause period too. So that's really amazing. And you're able to make it accessible by having access to different insurances. Is it PPO insurances or HMO or Medicaid or a little bit of sprinkling?
Primarily commercial at this point. And then again, like we have sliding scale and deep sliding scale that we can leverage in situations where folks are underinsured or uninsured. That we've looked at a few Medicaid contracts, and we have one that we work with in Tennessee here with UHC Community Plan. And I think that there's just still a lot of learning that we need to do to figure out the right modeling to make sure that it's sustainable. But yeah, there's a lot of great opportunities there too.
Great. I really just appreciate you being on the show and sharing about all these really important topics. I hope the people who are listening today can maybe share this with someone who's going through this, maybe who's pregnant, or, I mean, even has an 8-month-old. Maybe sometimes you're like, oh, I'm 8 months postpartum, I'm fine. But no, I was not fine for a while.
Well, and right, like the trigger points that we look at, Naomi, is like, it's like when we give birth, but then it's when we get our periods back, and it's when we stop nursing can be a contributing factor to that too. And all of those trigger hormonal changes can be a vulnerability for us. And so, it's been an honor talking to you. And I'm so grateful for the work that you and your team at Milk Diva does in this world. Thank you so much for having me.
I totally appreciate you. You are amazing. Thank you so much, Amy. Thanks for listening. To learn more about newborn feeding and get your free swipe file, visit milkdiva.com/newborn feeding. And if you've ever said, wow, I wish I would have known that while you're listening to this podcast, then help a friend out and share this podcast with them. You can also help us by leaving us a rating so more people can benefit from finding this podcast. Medical disclaimer. Please know that all opinions expressed on this podcast are solely my own and not intended to substitute the advice of a medical provider. I am not a medical doctor, and all information shared is intended for your general knowledge and is geared towards full-term, healthy singleton infants and healthy, low-risk pregnant or postpartum women.